What's up guys, it's J&A Exotics and welcome back. So today's going to be a reptile slash amphibian room tour, and I'm almost positive everyone's in this one, so without any further ado, let's begin. Hey, before we begin, if you guys want to support the channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button. I'll also post my channel link right up here if you guys want to watch more content, and I'll post my Instagram right around here somewhere if you guys want to check that out. Thank you. So we're going to start off with the green keel-bellied lizard Shenron. He's been doing amazing so far. The species is really fun to keep, but the only problem is they like to hide often. He's currently being housed in an Exoterra 18x18x24 tank. It's a bioactive setup with a pothos, a fake bromeliad, and some wandering Drew clippings. The cleanup crew in this tank is made up of dwarf white isopods and springtails. His humidity is on the higher side at the moment, and that's because he's shedding, and I want to make sure he has a good shed. For the lighting, I'm using a Zillow 50-watt halogen heat bulb, a 5.0 tropical UVB, and 2 assorted LEDs on top of the tank for the plants and the visual light. Next up on the list is our yellow spotted salamander tank. We currently have 3 yellow spotted salamanders in here. All 3 are currently being housed in the 10-gallon aquarium. It's a bioactive setup with dwarf white isopods and springtails. For the sake of not repeating myself for all of the enclosures, all of my bioactive setups have the same exact cleanup crew: dwarf white isopods and springtails. I use an LED light for a day and night cycle, and it's also for the plants. The tank's pothos isn't doing too well, but the wandering Drew clipping is doing great. I don't know where the other 2 salamanders are, but I do know where Sal likes to hide out. Sal's doing great, and he's fairly large at this point. We'll be upgrading these guys to a 20-gallon tall aquarium in the future. That way I can add a deeper substrate layer because these guys are a mole species, and I can add a better variety of plants. Up next is a new addition that you guys may have seen on one of our YouTube shorts, but it's our coffee Pac-Man frog, Big Gulp. He's still really small, so I'm keeping him in a 2.5-gallon vivarium. It's a bioactive setup, and he has some golden pothos clippings in there. He also has an LED light for the day and night cycle and for the pothos. We took our nephews to their first reptile expo, and they wanted to take home a pet. I was also on the market for a Pac-Man frog, so I ended up buying him, and whenever my nephews want to come over and see him, they can come over and see their frog. He's actually really active, and I always see him inside of his water bowl. Up next is another new addition that I've actually been keeping really quiet about. I ended up buying a baby Emperor Scorpion, and I named him Sub-Zero. And for all you Mortal Kombat fans out there, yes, I named a Scorpion Sub-Zero. Being only about an inch long, he's being housed in a 2.5-gallon enclosure. His substrate consists of cocoa fiber, cypress bedding, leaf litter, and sphagnum moss. He has a cork bark piece to hide under on the hot side, and he has a leaf to hide under on the cool side. He also has a shallow water dish to drink from, and it helps with the humidity. His hot side of the enclosure is heated by an under tank heater, and there's also no light on this tank. He gets his light from the Pac-Man frog's enclosure. The LED is bright enough and it just puts a small amount of light into the tank. I know scorpions aren't a big fan of light, so I didn't want to go and put a light directly on top of the enclosure. The next pet up on the list is our trio of Vietnamese Mossy frogs. They're being housed in an Exoterra 18x18x24 bioactive enclosure with a drip wall. This tank also has an LED light on top for a day and night cycle and for the plants. As you can see, their tank's pretty much taken over by the pothos plants. They have a water portion on the bottom, and they also have a land portion. We actually picked up a new Mossy frog at the New Hampshire Reptile Expo, and I'm really hoping it's a female. The species is awesome to own, and I love hearing them call at night. Up next is another new addition, and this is probably the craziest looking pet I own by far. This is our Talus whip scorpion, Kingler. So I may not be able to get some shots of him today, but if I can't, I'm going to go ahead and throw some shots of him from the other day. The Talus whip scorpion is currently being housed in a Zilla 12x12x18 tank. He has the same mixture of bedding that the Emperor Scorpion does. Unfortunately, his background's still not in yet. I have no clue where it is, and when I go and check the tracking number, it still says in transit, but it was supposed to be delivered a few days ago. When it does finally come in, it's just one of those cork flat backgrounds. He has a cocoa husk wall, that way it's easier for him to climb up, and I actually put the heat pad on the back side of that wall. So if he ever wants to go and get some heat, it's substantially easier for him to climb on that. The Talus whip scorpion also has fake leaves in the enclosure, and that way when I spray the tank down, he can go and drink the water droplets. I also have a small water cup in the enclosure, and that'll help with the humidity, and it'll also act as a water source if he wants to go and drink. Following the Talus whip scorpion, there are also more new additions. These new additions are morning geckos. Altogether, we have 5 of them in this enclosure. I actually got 2 of these guys the other day, and once I knew that they weren't going to escape the enclosure, I ended up putting them in with the bigger ones. All 5 of these guys are being housed in an Exoterra 12x12x18 bioactive enclosure. They have dwarf umbrella plants to climb, they have some watermelon vine in there, and they also have another plant that I'm not really too sure what it is, but it came with the first 3 when we bought them from the New Hampshire Reptile Expo. I ended up giving these guys a feeding ledge, and I offer them Pangea every now and then. These guys are very active at night, and they're really fast. Next up is going to be our 3 dart frog enclosures. All three of these enclosures share a 48-inch LED light that runs across the top of the tanks. First dart frog up on the list are the Dendrobates leucomelas. They're being housed in an Exoterra 18x18x18 bioactive enclosure. We have 3 Dendrobates leucomelas that are currently housed in here. They have a creeping Charlie plant in here that took over the entire tank. There used to be bromeliads, ferns, tiny tears, but I'm pretty sure they're all dead at this point. There is one Begonias rex right on the left hand side that's still kicking though. I let all my dart frog tanks grow in like this on purpose, that way they feel safe and secure. Dendrobates leucomelas are one of the best pet amphibians you can keep. Our next dart frog species we own are our 2 Santa Isabelle dart frogs. They're currently housed in a 12x12x18 bioactive setup. This enclosure was taken over by the watermelon vine and the Java moss. I still rarely see these guys, but today is a special treat because we're going to be able to see one of them. Santa Isabelles are really cool dart frogs to keep. I love that lime green stripe that runs all the way down their body, and they really have a unique call. The final dart frogs on our list are going to be our 2 Ufaga Pamilio, also known as the Blue Jeans Strawberry dart frogs. These guys are also in a 12x12x18 Exoterra enclosure with a bioactive setup. They have a big begonia salsa that takes up pretty much the entire enclosure, and they have a white nerve plant. Unfortunately, none of these guys are out today. I waited for a while, but they're just hiding under the plant matter. Even the frog who hangs out in the back of the enclosure underneath the leaves wasn't in the spot today. I'm going to try to find a picture for you guys, that way if you're new here, you can see what they look like. Next up is our super tiger-legged monkey tree frog. Now, this guy is currently in a temporary setup. He's in the process of getting his tank redone. I did drop and shatter his water bowl in the move, so he has this little ceramic one in there for now. So his temporary setup does have dwarf white isopods and springtails because I took his substrate from his old enclosure and I put it in here, but there are no live plants. This little guy is about 1 inch long and he's currently sleeping. If you guys were around when I first bought him around 2 years ago, I ended up buying him because of that lighter circle right around his head. So the skin's indented right there and it looks like scar tissue, but I'm not entirely sure what happened to him. Whatever it was, it never affected him and he's doing just fine. His new enclosure is almost complete and I'll show that off in the next room tour. We're on the home stretch, people. We're almost done here. Up next is our Tokay Gecko, Totodile. So this little guy packs a real attitude, and he's actually out for once. He's currently being housed in his curved tank. I'm not sure what the measurements are, but when we got it, the box said it was 25 gallons. He lives in a bioactive setup with golden pothos and wandering Jew clippings. I was originally going to house this guy in a new enclosure, but I ended up changing my mind. As far as lighting goes, this guy has a 50-watt halogen bulb for his basking spot, and he has an LED light for his plants and to give a day and night cycle. The next enclosure is housing our Crested Geckos. There are currently 2 in here, one's a male, and I believe the other to be a female. This is a temporary housing situation that I'm currently monitoring. I'm making sure no one's overstressed and no one's causing harm to one another. So far, so good. Everything seems to be great. This is one of the custom enclosures I made. The enclosure itself is just about 20 gallons. It's a bioactive setup with dwarf umbrella plants, a croton, and a golden pothos. For lighting, I'm using an LED light for a day and night cycle and for the plants. For heat, I'm using a Zoomed Nano heat dome with a 25-watt bulb. I'm using this to provide a proper heat gradient for when temperatures start getting too cold. The confirmed male we have is a Harlequin and he almost has a complete pinstripe. The one I believe to be a female is a flame morph and she has some Dalmatian spots on her. These guys aren't out right now and I don't want to bother them, so I'm going to throw up some old videos and pictures, that way you guys can see them. The other gecko's enclosure will be done the next room tour, so I'll show that off next time. Up next on the list are our 4 red-eye tree frogs. These guys are being housed in the neighboring custom tank and it's the exact same size as the other one. It's also a bioactive setup with a croton, dwarf umbrella plant, an arrowhead plant, and a golden pothos. The larger leaves provide the frogs a place to sleep, unless they decide to sleep on the glass. This tank also has an LED light for a day and night cycle and for the plants. These guys are really cool to watch move around in their enclosures at night, and when they vocalize, it's awesome. Red-eye tree frogs are up there on my list of amphibians that I highly recommend. Up next is my favorite reptile species so far, it's the emerald tree skinks. If you guys watched my last emerald tree skink update, then you know that we now have 5 in total. They're currently being housed in a 36x18x36 Zoomed tank. Again, it's a bioactive setup and we have golden pothos, wandering Jew, a bird's nest fern, a bromeliad, mother-in-law's tongue, and an assorted plant from Petco. As far as lighting goes, I have a 24-inch LED strip light that runs across the tank, I have a 100-watt power sun bulb, and I have another LED on the back side of the enclosure. These guys are doing great, and I'm keeping an eye on one female in particular because she seems to be getting a little thicker than usual. Finally, last but not least, the oldest reptile in my collection, the OG, the reptile that started it all. This is Charizard, our leopard gecko. She's 18 years old, going on 19 very soon. This old girl is being housed in an Exoterra 18x18x12 naturalistic setup. From left to right, she has a humid hide, a cool hide, and then a hot hide on the right. She has a built-in feeding dish and a water bowl, and the water bowl may look dirty, but it has that ring around the top, but it's not dirty. I've tried to scrub that off with an old toothbrush before, and it wouldn't come off. It's just stained. She has a heat pad under her hot hide, and she has a 5.0 tropical UVB for light. I used the tropical 5.0 UVB bulb, that way she can benefit from the UVB without getting burned. Some people may think that an 18-18-12 is too small for her, even though it equals the 20 gallons in volume, but she has a hard time seeing, and I don't really feel comfortable putting her in a larger enclosure knowing that she can't see too well. I don't want her to not be able to find her food, and with her being 19 years old, I really don't want to put anything at risk. I'm very happy that she lived this long, but for an animal that lives to 15 to 20 years, she's getting really close to the end of her life, and I don't know how much more time I have left with her. And it's really going to be tough when she goes because I've pretty much had her my whole life. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the room tour. If you guys want to support the channel and subscribe, I'll post my channel right around here. Or if you guys just want to go and watch more content, I'll post that right around here. Thank you.